Next, we have HTML forms. HTML form tags designate an HTML form. Forms can be used to pass input values from a web page on a client to a server. Forms can have two basic methods, get and post. Post is for sending information to a server for use in databases or PHP, Perl, CGI, ASP scripts for processing. Setting a form's action to post sends all the values and fields filled out in an HTML form to the server. Get is for queries and requests made to databases and search engines. Get places all name and value pairs filled out in an HTML form into a query string that is appended to the URL. Here are some basic HTML form examples. In the first example, we're utilizing the post method, and then the action is going to simply be to mail all of the information in each field included in the form to the address charlesgermany@np.com. The next example is also a post method, and the action is to send everything in the form to processFormInfo1.php. In the third example, we're using the get method, in which case we're going to append everything to the URL or string and send it to processFormInfo2.php. Here in NetBeans, we've got a simple web page form in HTML, and you can see here's the opening form tag and here's the closing form tag highlighted by NetBeans. The method is post, and the action is to simply mail to. Now, normally you're going to send this to a PHP or an active server page or ASP page, but in this case, since we're just covering basic HTML, JavaScript, and cascading style sheets, and we haven't really gotten to PHP or ASP yet, I'm just going to use the mail to option, which would just open up the local email client on the user's machine to send them an email. Now, what would be sent in the email would be the information typed into these text boxes here. And we're going to cover these in just a moment. These were attributes of the input tag, but basically this would just be three text boxes for first name, last name, and a message. And then there's a reset and a submit button, and when they click on submit, that's where the action takes place. Alright, so the method would be post, and then as soon as they click the submit button, the action would be, in this example, to mail all of the information they typed in to this address here, cgermany77@yahoo.com. Boy, I bet I'm going to get spam now, but anyway, that'll kind of give you an idea how a simple form would work. And just to show you, I'll load it up in Firefox. Alright, so spam, spam, spam. And I'm going to click on submit. Alright, and as you can see, here's the address from mail to, and then form post, in this case subject header, first name Charles, last name Germany, and the message was spam, spam, spam. Our next step brings us to HTML input tags. There are many different element and object types that are used with the HTML input tag. Some of these types are text, password, hidden, radio, checkbox, button, reset, submit, file, and image. Even though there are many different types of objects that use the HTML input tag, the input tag itself has several attributes that can be used with each type of object. Some of these attributes are type, which specifies the object or element type of the input tag, read-only, which makes an element read-only, checked, which selects a checkbox or radio button, name, which sets the name of the variable or element, value, which assigns a value to a field of the element, width, which sets the width in characters of the field, tab index, which sets the tab order of the element, and accept, which sets content types accepted by the element if it is of the type file. Here's an example of an input tag that is of type text. So in other words, it would create a text field, and it would be called first name. One object created with HTML input tags is the simple text field. Its purpose is to allow the user to type information into a specific field in a form in an HTML document. For example, here we have three text fields, one for first name, one for last name, and one for social security number. We create them first by using labels. This is the part that the user will actually see on the web page. In other words, first colon, last colon, and SSN colon. Now, within the input tags, that will be invisible to the user, but we're declaring the field name. So F_name, L_name, and SSN would be the field names of our text fields. And then the type, of course, is text, and the size is 25 columns. And once again, we're using a similar example to the previous example. So within our form tags, we have input tags. And specifically here, we're looking at text fields. So we want to look at these input tags here. And notice the type is text, 25 columns, and it's going to be called first name, last name, and message. And then here's just a reset and a submit button. And to see how that looks, another object created with an HTML input tags is the hidden text field. Its purpose is to allow the web page to pass values and information to the server from the client without the user ever seeing those values displayed in the web browser. The values are hidden from the user. Here are 3 examples. In this case, we have field names recipient, message, and sender. The type has been set to hidden, and the values that would be sent to the server would be Gaius Baltar, UR Asylon, and 6. Here in our next example, once again we have some HTML form code. And in this case, the method is post, and the action is going to be mailed to. So we'll use this local systems email client just to show you or emulate what the server would be seeing or the kinds of information the server would get. And unlike the previous example, instead of being type text, these input tags are of type hidden. So this is all HTML code that the user would not see on the page. In other words, all the user is going to see in HTML when they view it through a web browser is secret 1, 2, and 3 with the colons after it. However, what we're transmitting to a PHP page or an active server page or a Perl CGI script, whatever, via the hidden attribute would be this: secret 1 banana, secret 2 applet, secret 3 mango. Okay, and now again, this is not useful for storing something like password information or any information that needs to be of a secure nature. You would want to keep all of that on the server and protect it carefully. So we're not talking about like passwords and things like that, but this is still useful for when you're maybe building shopping carts or guest books or applications, games, things like that, where you simply need to send bits and pieces of information that don't really need to be secure. Like you don't care if someone were to click on source and view it, but you don't want to dirty up the page with values that might confuse the person who's browsing the page, or that might distract the person from browsing the page. So just to show you that it's hidden, I'm going to load it in Firefox. We'll view it. And we'll use the local systems email client to show you what would be sent to the PHP page or active server page, or therefore to the server. And you can see secret 1 banana, secret 2 applet, and secret 3 mango. Next, we have HTML password text fields. This third type of text field, created with an input tags, has the purpose of masking and ciphering the characters a user types into a particular text field, so that no one else can see what is being typed and steal that information. For example, if we created an input tag with the name userPass and we set the type to password, it would create a text field, but when the user typed in the text field, instead of seeing alphanumeric characters, they would simply see dots masking the input. So that way anyone who was looking over their shoulder wouldn't be able to see the password they were typing in. Okay, and in this example, we're also staring at some HTML form code. And again, we have 3 input tags. But this time, instead of being set as type text or hidden, it's set as type password. And that means that when you type alphanumeric characters in for the password in the field, it's not going to display those characters. It's just going to display little dots. And that's useful if someone's typing their password and they're worried about somebody looking over their shoulder or something and seeing their password. So to show how that works, I'm going to go ahead and view the page in Firefox. And we'll just type in banana, all caps, and apple, all caps, and kiwi, all caps. I'm going to click on submit. And you can see, here are my passwords, banana, apple, and kiwi. But you weren't able to see anything, just dots in the password field. A fourth type of object that can be created with input tags is the checkbox. Checkboxes provide small squares within a form which the user can click to select different values. Here are some examples. Let's say that we were going to allow the user to choose from among a group of favorite cat types. In this case, with labels, we'll display the words Maine Coon, Persian, and Siamese on the web page. Now, hidden within the HTML code, which the user won't see, will be the input tags. Now, here we're going to give all of the input tags the same name, cat type. we're going to set the type to be checkbox, but the values will be different. So depending on which box they check, it will change the value of cat type to match that value. It could be Maine Coon, Persian, or Siamese. You get the idea. Once again, we have another example, HTML form code, and here's some input tags. And this time the type is set to checkbox. Okay, so it's just going to make a little square box, and if you check it, it's going to assign the corresponding value, link, Zelda, Midnight, Ponies, Zant, or Girahim, if that's how you say it, to the variable name Zelda character. So let's see how that looks when we view it through Firefox. Alright, so here's all the boxes. And which characters do you like? I'm going to choose Link and Zelda and Midna and Epona. I'm going to click on Submit. And so you can see Zelda character Link, Zelda character Zelda, Zelda character Midna, and Zelda character Epona, and the ones I left unchecked were not sent. A fifth type of object that can be created with input tags is the radio button. Radio buttons are small circular buttons within a form which the user can click to select different values. Usually, radio buttons are grouped together by giving them all the same name but different values, so that only one radio button can be selected at a time. Like in those old-fashioned cars where they had the radios with 5 buttons, and mechanically when you pressed one, all the other ones would pop out. That's sort of the idea behind a radio button, see? In this example, we have favorite dog types. And we're going to display the values Border Collie and Chihuahua so that the user can see it on the web page. However, hidden in the HTML source, which the user will not see, are the input tags. In this case, we specify the name dog type for both. We specify the type as radio for both, but they have different values. So if the user selects Border Collie, then the value of dog type will be Border Collie. And if, on the other hand, they check Chihuahua, the value of dog type will be Chihuahua. But only one button can be selected from the group. That's the idea. Once again, we have some HTML form source code, and we have input tags, and this time the type has been set to radio. You can see that here. Notice that they all have the same name. So because of that, it's only going to allow you to select or check one radio button at a time. And then when we do that, the values are going to be either yes, no, or maybe for the variable or field item like spam. So let's see how that looks in Firefox. And you can see that we have these round radio buttons, and you can see that when I check one, it unselects the other one, or the previously selected one. And do I like spam? I'm just going to check no and submit. And you can see the value that would be sent to the server. It goes without saying, when discussing the topic of forms and input elements, that we should also discuss submit and reset buttons. Within almost every form are usually two special buttons. The submit button causes the form to perform whatever is described within the method and action tags of the form. This usually involves sending all the values input into the form's elements by the user to the server. The reset button clears all the text fields and brings the form back to a default state. Both of these special buttons are created with the input tag. Here are some examples. The first example, we're creating a submit button with input, and then the type would be submit, and the value would be submit survey. So the user wouldn't see the code, but on the web page they would simply see a rectangular button that said submit survey. The next example is the reset button, and again all the user would see would be a rectangular button that said clear survey. Here we are inside of HTML form tags, and in our input tags we have a reset and a submit, and these two types create rectangular buttons, and in this case the value attribute will be the caption or label that appears on the button. So in this case the reset button will say clear survey, and the submit button will say submit survey. So let's see how that looks in Firefox. And to show you how it works, I'll type some crazy text here, and if I click clear survey, notice it clears everything. And then if I click submit, it'll launch my email client. Now we come to text areas. An HTML text area creates objects that are much like text fields, except that text areas are generally larger and have multiple lines. They can be used for both input and output and have several attributes, some of which are wrap, which turns word wrap on or off. The values can be soft, that is without carriage returns, hard, with carriage returns, or off. Cause, which specifies the columns, rows, which is the rows, name, which is the text area element name, often useful with JavaScript and cascading style sheets, tab index, which controls the tab order of the text area, and value, which is the text in the text area. Here's an example of a text area tag. Here in this HTML source, we have a text area tag. And let me see if I can get NetBeans to highlight it. Alright, so you can see the open and closing text area tags. The name, which is sort of like the variable name, would be message. And then, of course, the value of that variable would be whatever text the user typed into it. And since it's in form tags, then in this case the method is post, and the action will simply be to open the email client and mail it. But it could just as likely be sending this to a PHP script for processing, or an ASP, an active server page script. To see how that looks, we'll load it up in Firefox. And you can see that the text area is quite a bit larger than the text field. And whereas the text field is sort of single line input, I can do multiple lines of input with my text area. Okay, and go ahead and send it. And you can see, here's the subject, this is a text area, and then here is my message. And this is all the crazy text I typed in along with the carriage returns and things in the text area. HTML select and option tags can be used to create drop-down lists, which can be used to present several items at once on a list to a user, allowing them to select only one item from the list. For example, here we're going to display on the web page, choose a weapon, and we're going to create a selection structure or a drop-down list from which the user will be able to select one of the following weapons: Master Sword, Goddess Bow, Whip, Clawshot, Slingshot, Mace, or Beetle. Yes, this is a Zelda fan page. Well, the object that will be selected is where you see the attribute colored in red that says selected. So in this case, by default, the Master Sword would be selected. Once again, we're looking at some HTML form code, and within the form code, you'll see that we have a drop-down list, and well, first off, there's a label which says weapons, and then we have a selection structure, and that's between open and closing select tags. And notice the name is weapons, and you can think of this attribute as the variable name if you program in languages like C++ or Java or Visual Basic. So think of this as a variable name, and the value that would be assigned to that variable would be here in these options. Notice I'm highlighting open and closing option tags. So this will create a drop-down list, and the user will be able to select one of those options. And when they do, that value will then be assigned to the variable name weapons. And then that would be sent to the PHP page, the ASP page, the server, whatever it is we're going to do with it when we either post or get as the form method in action. Also notice that the default selected item will be the Master Sword. And we denote that by using the attribute selected and saying just equals selected. Seems redundant, doesn't it? So let's see how that looks in Firefox. Okay, and here's our label, and well, right here a bit. Here's our drop-down list, and here are our options. And notice the default selected option was Master Sword. I'm going to change it to Goddess Bow. And when I submit it, it'll basically simply send the variable name weapons and the value, so Goddess Bow. And you can see here's the variable name weapons, and then the value assigned to it was Goddess Bow. So that is what the PHP script or server would be receiving. As an alternative to drop-down lists, you can create an HTML list box. HTML select and option tags can be used to create list boxes, which can be used to present several items at once in a list to a user, allowing them to select only one item from the list. Unlike drop-down lists, list boxes present more than one item at a time. Just remember that as the key difference. Again, we're going to display choose a weapon on the web page in this example, but notice that in the select tag, we have size, which is set to 7, so we're going to display 7 items at once, or 7 rows. And we've also specified multiple. And because of this, you'll be able to see all of these items on the page without having to scroll through them like you would if you're using a drop-down list. again, the default selected item will be master sort. And here in this example, in our HTML form code, we have another selection structure. And in this example, we're using the multiple attribute and setting the size to 7. So instead of being a drop-down list that would only display one item at a time on one line, it's going to display 7 items all at once. And then the user will still be able to select an item, and when they click on submit, it'll be sent to the PHP script or active server page or server. And of course the variable name will still be weapons. And we could sandwich it all inside of a label, or if we don't like that, we could also just do our label here. Either way. Alright, so basic selection structure, I'll get NetBeans to highlight it. Basic options. That way you can kind of follow the syntax and see how it works. So let's save our page and view it in Firefox. Alright, now you can see that it's showing multiple items, and notice that the goddess bow has been selected. And again, if we look at the source, notice that that's the default selection there, hence the attribute selected and redundantly selected as the value. So if I were to click on submit, notice the variable name weapons assign the value of goddess bow. Now we're looking at bullets in HTML. I'm going to give you 4 examples. In the first 2, we have example A, which is an unordered list. And this is just going to display dots, and the items will then come to the right of the dots. Notice the open and closing unordered list tags, which are UL, and then the list item tags, which are LI. In example B, we have an ordered list. So instead of dots, this would display numbers, 1 and 2, and then however many more items I would add, it would simply prefix it with a number in sequential order. In the next example, example C, I have an order list, but instead of using numbers, I'm specifying letters with type equals A, in this case capital letters. So if I were doing an outline for a paper or a chapter or something in a book that I were posted online, it would be A, B, C, D, and so forth. And then finally, my last example, D at the bottom, is an ordered list with Roman numerals, and I specify that with type equals I. Also notice the tags, instead of being UL, are OL for an ordered list, whereas the unordered list is UL. Here's the HTML source for different types of bullets. So in this case, the first example here is an unordered list with the tags UL for unordered list and LI for list item. And that's just going to create the little circular dots. And then if you don't like that, here's another example, an unordered list, but you can also use discs or circles or squares with the type attribute interchangeably. The next example is going to be an ordered list, so instead of UL, it's OL. And then list items, they'd just be numbered sequentially by default. The next one is an ordered list, OL, but type capital A means that it'll be capital A, capital B, capital C, as if you were doing an outline. The next one is an ordered list, but it'll be lowercase ABC, as if you were doing, sub-items or subcategories in an outline. Then next we have an ordered list, but this will be capital Roman numerals. And then finally we have an ordered list, and it will be lowercase Roman numerals. And so let's just see what that looks like in Firefox. And here are our ordered lists and unordered lists. Next we have pre-tags. Text type between pre-tags is designated as pre-formatted text. This causes text between the tags to be displayed on the web page just as it is in the HTML code without the need for BR or other formatting tags. For example, if I added open and closing PRE tags and I typed Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers on 4 separate lines, it would appear to the user just as it does in the HTML source, or as you see it here. Here's an example of some HTML pre-format tags. And between the open and closing tags, we have a small statement of text here. And even without the BR tags for carriage return or line feed, it will still appear to the user in the web page as it does here in the HTML source, which is not the usual case, unless, of course, you were using pre-tags. So to see how that looks in Firefox, you can see that it appears in the web page just as it does in the HTML source, line for line. Here are some additional HTML formatting tags. HR adds a line. U adds an underline. I italics. B is bold, and strong is equivalent to bold. P designates a paragraph, and the div tags designate logical divisions within a document. This allows you to divide and reference a page in block-level elements, and this can be very useful with cascading style sheets and JavaScript. And finally, span tags, which group and apply styles to inline elements used with CSS. Here in this HTML source, I just wanted to show some of those additional formatting tags in action. So notice that first off, we have text and pre-tags, so we don't need to use line break or BR. And then, of course, there's the font tag. We've already talked about that, but here's underline and open and closing tags, strong and bold and open and closing tags. Here's italics and open and closing tags. And so you can see just some of these tags being used in this document. So let's take a look at it in Firefox and see how that looks. Alright, and now you can see HTML formatting tags, and then underline and italics and bold and just different attributes. And of course here's a line HR, and that's this tag here. Frames can provide innovative ways to display web pages and a convenient way to menu and navigate a site. On the other hand, they can make a site extremely difficult to promote in the search engines and waste a lot of screen real estate. If overused, they become distracting and annoying. One should use them judiciously in a project. A frame page begins with a master frame set. This frame set specifies the frame objects that will make up the page, columns, rows, and width. Every frame object on this master frame set page is then loaded into the browser as though it were its own miniature page. For example, here's code that will load two other frames into a main frame set. In this case, within the frame set tags, we have two frames, one named menu and one named main, which will load menu HTML and body HTML. The calls equals 110 specifies that the first frame object, starting on the left, will be 110 columns across. The asterisk or wildcard specifies that the next frame object, starting in the next column, will span the remaining space on the page. Here's another example, this time using three frame objects for rows and columns. And we have a nested frame set. So in other words, we have an outer frame set, whereas before we specify that for the first 110 columns to the left, we're going to have a frame named menu that loads the page menu HTML. Then we have a wildcard or asterisk, which means that the remaining columns can be used for other frames. Well, nested within this outer frame set and frame, we declare another frame set, an inner frame set. And within it, this time instead of specifying columns, we're going to specify rows. So instead of going across from left to right, we're moving down. We're going to move down 175 rows, and that will be the top frame, which will be, in this case, photo. And the source will be photo HTML. And then the remaining rows will be the main body or the main frame, and that's going to load main HTML. So you can kind of see how it works. Also notice that if the browser does not support frames, you would place text within the no frames tags. And within those open and closing tags, whatever message you type, in this case, this page uses frames, but your browser does not do that, please follow this link to browse our site without frames. And then that way, they would be able to browse the site with their browser as well, even though it did not support frames. Again, if rows and columns seems confusing, let's review this. In the previous instance, we specified that the left frame object named menu will be 110 pixels wide with cos equals 110, and that the remaining space in the frame set will be given to the next frame set nested within the original. At this point, we then used rows equals 175 and the asterisk to specify that in the second set, the first declared frame object will span 175 pixels down, and that the second declared frame object will get the remaining space on the page, minus the 110 pixels taken by the frame object in the left column, and the 175 pixels taken by the frame in the top right. Note, when using frames, you will also want to utilize the target attribute of the ahref tag in order to specify which frame a hyperlink is to load a page into when it is clicked. For example, here we have a hyperlink tag, and we're specifying main body as the target. Above, when the user clicks the hyperlink, it will load the page madzeldafan.html into the frame main body in a multi-frame set. Look at the next tag, ahref madzeldafan.html, and in this example, the target is top. Look at the next example. Here we again have Mad Zelda Fan HTML and a hyperlink tag, and this time the target is new. In the above examples, the page madzeldafan.html will be loaded into a new parent window that is non-framed when you use target, top, or new. Here in this HTML example, you can see that we have the parent page, or the frame set. And in the frame set, we're going to move column-wise from left to right over 110 pixels. And so therefore, the first frame, named side menu, which loads the HTML page, s_sidemenu.html, will then consume those 110 pixels, and that'll be the side menu. And then the remaining number of pixels, indicated by the wildcard or the asterisk here, whatever's left, will be the body. And so in this example here, we have a frame set that is inside this frame set, right? It's nested inside the frame set. And so while we come over 110 and we load s_side menu HTML as the side menu, and we have the remaining pixels from left to right for what is left, then the second nested inner frame set begins there. And it's going to drop down 75 pixels, and the first frame will be top menu, and it's going to load the HTML page s_top menu.html. And then, again, since it uses the wildcard of the asterisk, the remaining pixels will be given to the body, in this case called main body, and it will load the HTML source page, sMainBody.html. And so when we load it, let's see what that looks like. This parent page here is just going to load these three child pages, main body, side menu, and top menu. So we'll view it in Firefox. And so you can see each one of these is actually a separate HTML page, side menu, top menu, and main menu. And again, if you were to look at it, here's the HTML source for the main body. Right, there's the text. Here's the HTML source for the side menu. And here's the HTML source for the top menu, just some hyperlinks. Also notice that here we're making use of the target attribute. We have to do that, or at least we should do that when we're utilizing frames. If I didn't, and they clicked on the hyperlinks, it would load the pages into the top menu frame, which is too narrow to display the page properly. So usually most frame websites will have within the frame set sort of a main frame, somewhere where there's a large frame where you can view other web pages and links that they click on. And that's where I would want to target things. So here I'm using target top and target new, and that way when I click on the hyperlink, it would just open it in a brand new page and not inside of a frame, and I could view it. But let's say that I wanted to open the page in a frame. Well, I'm just going to target the frame name. So the biggest frame that I have in my frame set is main body. And so here, when they click on this link, J2HTML tables HTML, it's going to target main body and load that frame into main body. So you've seen the HTML for all of the individual pages, but this is sort of the master page, the frame set page, or the parent object that loads all of those child objects, all of those individual frame pages in the frame set. And so again, so you can see how the target tag works. Let me go over here, and I'm going to go ahead and we will view this. Alright, so here's the parent page, and here to see how these links behave, if I click on this link, notice it loads it into a new page. And that's because, in this case, our target was specified as top. And if I click here, loads it into a new page. And again, using the target attribute, our target was specified as new. Now here, the target is specified as main body. And so now you'll see in the third link, it'll actually load it into the frame here. The frame specified as main body. And then of course here's our videos. See how much my tiny little notebook can handle. Okay.